I am currently sharing my screen, and I have your three primary interfaces pulled up currently. Just make sure you can see Imperial Valley Community College. This is your TD admin homepage. And so this is where most of the build takes place from a configuration perspective. And this is where I'll be building and designing stuff based on your guys' forms that you send me and feedback that we get. And I'll show you where I'm doing that. Only for your edification down the road. If you ever need to tweak or edit anything, certainly want you to know where this is done at. But for the most part, I'll be doing the hands-on build for you while we're while we're in our sessions together. And when the sessions end, this is what I'll be doing between sessions. So I'll come back and show you where I'm building this stuff. So this is your TD admin area, and always remember my URL is slightly different than yours, but one of the reasons we call it TD admin is because it's part of the URL up here. It just means it's the administrative interface that most of you should have access to. And here's your list of administrators in here. And this is your primary homepage. And this is where probably 85–90% of your tool build out happens. TD Next, which is where your technicians are going to live in a day-to-day, it's often called the users area, but we call it TD Next because, again, you can see that in the URL, it says TD Next. And this is the day-to-day area where ticketing technicians live and work on tickets in this particular ticket application. They have access to a lot of these other applications. Eventually down the road, project management will take place in here with the projects and workspaces area and several others. But from a ticketing technician perspective, they're going to be spending time in the IT services ticket area, the My Work area, and we'll talk about that later on, especially during training. But this is where tickets will filter into the ticketing application in TD Next, and will show up in this main page here on your active tickets. So this is TD Next. And then your client portal is often called TD Client because, again, up in the URL it says TD Client. So this is a pretty bare bones client portal. This is your public-facing web portal, right? Where at some point in time, you guys are going to publicize that you have this new whiz-bang tool for create ticket submission and all of that great stuff. And people are going to get a client license. That's the free license that they will get, students, faculty, and staff, to be able to come here and submit tickets and services. Service requests, ticket requests, incident requests, and potentially project requests. And that's what we started with a couple of months back with James and Jonathan. That's why we already have a project request service out there. So this page can be designed much more visually pleasing than what it is right now. It's pretty bare bones in here. This is your home page, and eventually we'll circle back and spiff this up with you down the road. But for now, as we're building these forms and workflows, they're part of your service catalog. On this home page, I just happened to design it to pull in popular knowledge base articles and popular services. And that means the frequently requested services are these two, that you're only two that you have. And that's why they're showing up here automatically because of clicks in the tool. But you can create a home page later on. As I said, we'll build this out a little bit more, and we'll look at some examples of some other customers on how they built out your homepage, or take some ideas from maybe some of your marketing folks on how your typical homepage is designed. It's pretty utilitarian right now, and that's okay. The 5 forms and workflows that I'm going to be building for you in preparation for our usage after we do some technician training in early to mid-February is those 5 forms / workflows are going to be part of your service catalog, right? And your service catalog is going to house categories and then ultimately services. So right now we have 2 active categories. That's kind of the high level, parent level. And this box in here can put a short description of what's involved in this particular category. We won't touch on the project management one today, but the student services one is where that I'll build out those 5 forms. When we use that word forms, think of services, right? So right now, the only service that's in here is the verification of enrollment. And then eventually it will be the other ones, right? Eventually we'll activate. I've already built those out. I just haven't activated them yet because I just bare bones built them out. But we'll have in here an AB 540 exemption request service. We'll have the petition for that challenge one in here, the repeat course, and the residency questionnaire. So we'll have those 5 services here, right? This makes sense so far? Any questions?
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
All righty. So each of these services has a short description right here, which is just about, you can include, a paragraph. I believe it's got 200 and some characters that we can put in here. So we'll talk through what should this short description be. When they click on it, then they have a long description that can take up the majority of this page. And I've just copied and pasted some of those instructions on there. And we'll certainly want to clean this up. This long description here, as an administrator, or I should say as an enterprise person, I could edit this service right here in this area. Now your students or people requesting services won't see this edit service button. Obviously they don't have that permission. They'll be able to request the service, they could share it, and they could add it to their favorites, right, which would add it up here if they needed to, but they can't edit it. So you and I can edit this, and anybody else that's been given appropriate permissions could edit that. So here's where we could come in here. We can see this is our long description. It's a WYSIWYG editor, and we can format it appropriately. And that's what I'll be doing once we kind of square away the instructions that we want to display here. The other thing we can do, quite a few things up here. We talked about this a little bit the other day, I think, is that you can permission things from a service or a category perspective, right? What do I mean by that? Permissions can say who can access this. Out of the gate, all categories and services are public, so typically anybody can see them. If they're not supposed to see them, you can whitelist or blacklist things, right? So you could do that by deselecting the inherent permissions from a public perspective. And then down here, this would be whitelisting things, and this would be blacklisting things, right? So whitelisting would say anybody who is part of these 2 groups, and right now you only have 2 groups created, and that's okay, but you'd be whitelisting these 2 groups so that the folks in these 2 groups are the only ones that can access this service and submit a request for the verification of enrollment, right? Which you might want to do down the road on other services, and maybe it makes sense on this. I'll let you guys kind of chew on that. So that's whitelisting, saying only these groups. The opposite of that would be blacklisting, which would be saying these groups should not see this, right? So again, you can have the service available to any of your client license users and anybody that's a Team Dynamix authenticated user into the client portal. That's the highest level, or you could whitelist or blacklist with these permissions. For these 5 services, they all look like they're student services. Most of the time, you're going to leave things just wide open in public. But if there ever is a service that indeed only needs to be seen by the help desk or by others, then that's when you can come down and trim down those public permissions to maybe whitelist or blacklist people accordingly. So just an FYI. Alrighty. So let's go back to the actual service itself. Again, let's pretend that I'm a student and I need this service here. And I'm going to come over and hit this request service button. That's how we start this process. It's going to automatically pull me in. If they have a default account department, it would auto-populate that here. I don't have that on my user record.
That helper language underneath, is that something that we can modify, or is that hard-coded?
Absolutely. Yep. Nope.
Where it says
Absolutely.
the account department under which this ticket falls?
Yep.
Could
You
we
can change all of this.
Okay,
Yep.
that could help make it a little bit more understandable.
But whatever this is, it's going to be for everybody. So you have to think about it. It could be students, faculty, and staff.
So could it just,
Correct.
it could potentially just be role, because then their role is a student. That might be intuitive, but whatever whatever their input she has too, since this would be her form.
So the student ID, one of the items on that form, and this would be free form here.
Can we put a restriction on, can we put a character restriction?
No, you can't. I might have to change this one. Let me take a note on here. I think I put must have put integer on there instead of string. So I apologize. Let me take a note here for my homework. Birth date. I got to change that one too. Looks like both of those are integer. I think I have a date picker that I might select for that field anyway. All of these fields I'll have to go back and just change and tweak. Phone number. Email address, and then we talked about last time the semester of current enrollment verification can be here. These two, I didn't have time to do it, but these two, I think I'm going to have to create what's called a custom attribute, so that if they select this, I will pick up, nothing will happen. It will just stay here. But if they were to select, please mail to me, then it'll open up another free form field down here so that they could put the address they want that mailed to. And then the same thing for this one here.
This is Vicki. We were thinking on that option, would we be able to in the future put, please email me a copy, and then it would be a third option, and then we would just send it to their school email, their student email?
One. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We could certainly do that.
Yeah, because I think our biggest thing is security, but if it's going to that email address, we know it's a student email and they can receive notifications and personal information. So we feel pretty comfortable emailing it if that's a possibility to that IBC email.
Yeah. So this is the form so far. Certainly not 100% there yet. Then when the student submits a request, they get this request created successfully, and then you notice that there's a secondary bar that is opened up, and they can track all of their ticket requests that they've submitted, right? And here's a couple in here that I have, so they could see the status of it, where it's at. They could open it up. They could withdraw the request. They can add an attachment to it. This button here, these two buttons here, to TD Next and Update, are related to TD Next, and I happen to see it on my user record because I have access to TD Next. Your students won't have either of these two buttons because that requires TD Next access, by the way. But I can see that I'm the requester. I can again add attachments here, and I can withdraw the request, and I can see the feed, and I can comment on with people that are that are associated with this ticket later on. When people are responsible for it, they'll start to show up in here. And so the student can interact with this from a feed perspective, all here just within the client portal, because that's the only place they have access to. But that ticket itself went from the client portal here. It stayed here in part so that the student can track it, but it went over into your TD Next environment. And again, this is your primary technician place where they will do their daily work. And the IT services is your ticketing application for that. And when I click on tickets, now I see here's that ticket that was just submitted. And so I can open up this ticket and start to interact with it as a technician does. And if you recall real briefly the other day, when we were talking about the workflow. The workflow is a subset of this overarching ticket. So in the right, again, I can see who the requester is, and I can see that it indeed is in a workflow. And as a technician or anybody that has access to your ticketing application, I can come into this workflow and I can look at the history of the workflow. And I can see that there are 5 steps in here, and it's on this first step right now. And James, you probably got pinged with an email notification recently, or you will get pinged if you haven't already. But this will just allow the technician to track it, right? Because the technician here, there's a concept in Team Dynamics called primary responsibility and responsibility, right? What does that mean? That means typically somebody who has primary responsibility of the overall ticket, that person has to make sure that everything that needs to be resolved on this ticket gets done. So they have primary responsibility to resolve or close the ticket. Then there's responsibility, right? And so we can kind of see that here. I'm primarily responsible for this overall ticket, let's just pretend. But James has some responsibility on here to do a couple of these steps. So he's responsible for this step, then that notification goes out to the requester for these 2, and then James is responsible for this last step. So he's got responsibility here, but for just 3 smaller tasks or approvals. Once the workflow is done, then it's back to me to make sure everything is buttoned up on this ticket, and then I can go in and provide an update and change the status to in process if I needed to, or eventually resolved or closed it out. And these are all training items that, of course, we'll go over with your technicians when we do training down the road. But I can update how much time I've spent on this ticket. I can comment on what I've been doing. I can send notifications out and attachments and update other items on this particular ticket as needed. But back to the workflow, again, the workflow is a subset of the overarching ticket. So when, as this is going through right now, so this will show us the overall history of the workflow, and as well, it'll view the progress. This will take us into the actual workflow itself. We saw this the other day, and the blue task is the one that it's currently on. And then when James approves this, or I'm going to override his approval here in a second, then it'll go down this path here.
Mark, this is Vicki, a question. So like in the future, if let's say this workflow just changes a little bit, will we be able to edit it from here, or do we need to start a new process?
You would need, yeah, any changes to this workflow has to be done in the TD admin area. And then it would only propagate from that point going forward. So you can't on the fly come in here and change any of these, but and I'll show you where to do that in just a second here.
All right, great, thanks.
Current activities. James is responsible for this approval step. Because I have this privilege, I'm going to force the approval just to show us how this flows through the ticket. So I force the approval. This is a comment area that I could say, I'm approving this based on X, Y, and Z. So this is what that approver could do, something like that, right? And then that kicks it to the next step, right? So if we go back into the history, we can see where we're at, and it sent a notification out, and now it's down into this other area here because it bypassed. Remember that workflow has 2 paths. If it were rejected, it would have gone down a different path, but it's skipping over a couple of those rejection steps. So you and/or I approved it here. So the next step was to send a notification of completion to the requester, which it did. Any green check mark means this happened, and I'm the requester. So let's see if I got that notification. I'd have to double check that. So that would be sent to the requester there. So that's how they stay informed. Now we're back down on here. So we can see send student verification of enrollment. And that would be a task that somebody, not James probably is not doing this, but that would be something to think through, is what should be happening on this send student verification. That's how is that happening typically in your area or in the A&R area? How does a student, other than getting that notification that came from the tool here, is that form that is going to get, they're either going to pick it up or they're going to get it emailed or mailed. So let's say James is again handling this step. He can come in here and update it. And this is where just the physicalness of this is what we kind of have to think through, right? So on this particular task, do you want to keep this task open until, what do you put in here? Student will pick up form here on 12/4. And then would you leave this? So you have to kind of think through the machinations of what's happening on this step. And I don't know all of that.
Yeah,
This note, is for you guys to know what to do with this task as part of this overall ticket. If based on the technician is going to know that they will pick it up. So if the checkbox is I will pick it up, then they need to just put a note in here. And then my thought on the pickup part of it is you're probably going to want to keep this ticket and the task and the ticket opened until you physically know that they picked it up, right?
Yeah.
And then once they pick it up, then you could comment again, student picked up. So you have a trail of it. The student picked it up on, December 7th because they were a laggard, right? Or if it's please mail, or like you had said before, email, then the comment or the update here would be, if I came back over here on this particular task, would be emailed to student their verification, right? And then you would close this task out, right? This is not the ticket, this is just the task. And then once again, you could say it, I spent, half an hour on this or whatever it might be. And then I can send the notification here to the requester, right? To the student on here so that they could get this update that, hey, this was emailed to you right here. So then what has that done so far on our ticket, right? Because that workflow is just a subset of the overall ticket. So our workflow is now done, but the ticket's not closed yet. Most of the time you don't want the workflow to auto close the ticket because you might have some cleanup items on it or just some final oversight. So that's where it goes back to the person that's primarily responsible for this ticket to come in here one last time potentially and say that this is now closed, and I could load, now I did work on this for, however granular you want to get. This is 15 minutes. That's usually about as granular as you want to get on tracking ticket time, if you guys even do track ticket time. I'm just going to put a note in here, public comment. This has been completed. Once again, I can notify everybody that's part of this ticket. That would be the requester itself, the creator, which is me, I'm the same, James, and anybody else who is listed as responsible for any of those other potential tasks that are part of this. And then I could save this and it closes out this ticket. We see it's closed now. And if I refresh in my tickets area, I'll now see I just have the one, this other test one that I created. But I could always go back and filter and go, oops, I got to add something to that closed ticket. This filter on this page for everybody out of the box is pulling these current statuses here, 4 of the selected. It's pulling in new, open, in process, and on hold. So anything with an open status. If I need to search for something that's been resolved or closed, then I can just do this. And when I apply it, boom, there's the one that I had closed. And if I need to go back in here and update it or do something else to it, I can. So it's not like gone forever. So everything I did so far was done through the client portal as far as the ticket creation, right? So there's another way to do ticket creation. Before I take you into the admin to show you the design, I'm just going to show you that real quick. So ticket was created because a student knew about your client portal and knew about the services available there, searched on them, selected the verification of enrollment, kicked off the service, and that's what we just did. The second way to do things is that your technicians inside TD Next, inside their ticketing application, can come right in here and create a new ticket, which is how I created this manually created ticket in here. I'll just do this again real quick. It'll take me 2 seconds. So let's say that same student or a different student walked into the help desk area, and your technician or help desk person wanted to help them right there. They go into TD Next, come to the plus new button. Oh, you need a verification of enrollment. Let's do that one for you. And this is the right form. It's part of the right service. The requester is, and now I can select their name, right? You know, Mary Smith, Mike Jones, whoever it is. I can do that to make sure they get a notification. It's going to pull in. I'll just do this for myself again. And it's going to pull in their account department. Then they can come down here and populate those items on here, their student ID, the birth date, all of this stuff. So anything mandatory, it'll tell you if they missed it, but it created a new service request. And now if I'm the technician in the help desk, and let's just say that student, you know, we had a long conversation, I was researching stuff, and it took me, you know, 15, 20 minutes to start even creating this. I can add time right here, right now. I don't know how much you guys are going to be doing from a time tracking perspective, but if I spent a half an hour with them trying to resolve their issue, I can start recording that time on this ticket right now. And boom, I've saved that on that ticket. But these tabs up here, obviously we'll go over these as well. And once again, I manually created this ticket, and now it looks just like the one that came through the client portal, except I did it in TD Next, and now it's back in that workflow. Current activities is the same one that we started out with, and now it's the same process. So that's the second way that a ticket can be created, right? Manually inside the ticketing application in TD Next by a technician because of a walk-in to the help desk or a phone call, right? That sort of thing. And the third way, we're not going to do a deep dive into this, but the third way to create a ticket is through the email monitor service. And that is going into this part of the tool. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. This can design and create tickets based on that service, based on rules you guys have established, right? So as you create a new rule, you can, if somebody were to create an email that contains something in here like enrollment verification, then you guys could leverage that verification of enrollment, which is going to populate to your student services ticket type, to the enrollment verification form in here, so on and so forth. I won't save this one here, but that's the third way. So then you guys popularize that email address about submitting a support ticket. Based on your rules, if it said enrollment verification, it would fire off and it would do the exact same thing that we did here. It would create a ticket into that workflow and you'd be off and running. So those are the three ways that you can create a great ticket. Alrighty, so I'm just going to show you how I built this stuff, but I'm going to start with the service that was built and the services that I'm building for you. That's being done in the client portal. So I need to get into the application, the client portal application, to build out your service catalog services and categories. So I'm going to click on, I'm in TD admin, I'm in applications, and I'm going to grab my client portal application. And inside here is the service catalog. And in here are categories and services. So this is where I created those two categories. One is going to be the project management one, and the other one is the student services Very simple, plus new, create those. Then I create services, and I currently have 3 active services, 2 from previously in project management. So the active button, yes, yes, and yes. 2 of them are project management ones, the project idea service request and this funded project request. The one that I had been leveraging on this call so far is the verification of enrollment. It's active, that's why we're seeing it. These others, I started to just quickly build them out, and they're not active, so we're not gonna be able to see them until we activate those. So once I get this exemption request service polished up, if I click on it, and obviously this is a lot of text here, which we're gonna have to talk through how we wanna tweak that. But from an edit perspective, if this were ready for prime time, I would just need to go in and set that active, and then the service would show up in the client portal, and we'd be off and running and ready to use it, but we're not there yet. Oh, I probably should have. Let me show you a little bit more about this. So this is the active one. When I come back here to edit it, and again, if you were to add a new service, there's just the plus new button. So on here, here's the name, the category that I leveraged, make it active when I'm ready. I put James kind of as the default manager owner. All of these help buttons help you understand what these fields do. This is just the person who's going to keep this service up to date, primarily for maintaining and updating the service in your service catalog. It doesn't mean that James is the owner of every ticket that comes through this service. It's keeping the service up to date in the catalog. Asset application and maintenance window, you may leverage down the road in the appropriate service for a student service. You certainly don't need either of those, but you do need to request an application type, and that is the IT services ticketing application. There is a facilities ticketing application that's out there. You'd want to leverage that if this service was related to facilities, right? And then there's a projects one. So for all of our services, they're most likely going to fall here. And when you leverage the ticketing application called IT services, you need to leverage the type too. So that's why it says request application / type. We select the application, and then we need to select a type, and I've just named it the student services type. This is just the text on that green button that submits the request, or that starts the request submittal process. And the words on there are request service out of the box, but you could change this to say something like I have here, submit a request. And it would, not a project request, but I could say, now the words on that button would say submit a request if I save that. This is the form that I've created, that I've attached here, right? And I'll show you what that form looks like and where you can edit it in just a sec. And then some notifications that can go out. And then the workflow that I built, this is how I attached it. So I attached the workflow at the service level. And then here's our short description and our long description here. So that's where the service is defined. And again, that's in the service catalog area in the client portal application. The form, though, is in the IT services application, which can be a little bit confusing. So IT services, these are all the admin privileges I have to create things in this application, and one of them is the forms. We provide out-of-the-box forms for you. When you create a new form, I recommend leaving these out-of-the-box ones. These are ITIL classifications: change, incident, major incident, problem, release, service request. Leave those alone, and they can be here for your review, but create new ones, and you could leverage and copy from one of these or these. So this is the one that I created. If you needed to edit this form, simply click on it, and you can edit the location of your fields. This is all of your design capabilities of this form. And if you needed to add custom attributes, there's add a new field over here that you could create and put in your form, or to change some of those drop-down capabilities. So that's what I'm going to do. I have to come in here and edit some of these fields, create some new ones. And this is where I do the design. So the designer in here has a nice preview for you that shows you the form from the client portal perspective. So think of this as the student perspective in the client portal. These are only the fields they'll see. And then there's a TD Next viewpoint preview, and that's all of the fields that the technician will see. And they'll see significantly more because there's a lot more that a technician might need access to on that ticket. Most of your design is going to need to come from what the student sees right here. So this is where I'll go in and I'll have to switch out the integers to a string here for the phone number and correct these items, and then add in the email down here and so on and so forth. So once this changes here and I save them and I get the right changes done on this form and tweak those fields and add any new fields, then it'll propagate forward to that service, and for any incoming new requests, those changes will take effect. Does that make sense so far? I know it's quite a bit I've thrown at you, but again, I'll be doing the majority of this for you, but it's just good to know where it's happening, and you can by all means go in and look at items and tweak things if you ever needed to. But let me know if you have any questions on anything at any time.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for the help.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right.